Imagine being so trapped, so completely surrounded by your enemies, that the only way out is to dig your own grave. Now imagine doing that on purpose. In 52 BCE, Julius Caesar made a decision so insane, so impossibly reckless, that even his own generals thought he'd lost his mind. He took 50,000 Roman soldiers, positioned them between 80,000 warriors inside a fortress, and 300,000 more marching to crush them from behind. And then, here's where it gets absolutely wild. He ordered his men to build walls around themselves. No escape route, no backup plan. Just 50,000 Romans versus 380,000 Gauls, fighting in two directions at once, with Caesar gambling everything on one brutal strategy that would either make him immortal or get every single one of his men slaughtered. What happened next changed Western civilization forever, and the engineering marvel he created is still studied by military academies today. This is the story of how Caesar turned a death trap into the greatest killing machine the ancient world had ever seen. Let's rewind to understand just how spectacularly crazy this situation was. By 52 BCE, Caesar had been conquering Gaul for 6 years. But here's the thing about conquest versus control. They're not the same thing. You can defeat armies all day long, but that doesn't mean the people accept your rule. The Gauls were done with Rome, and for the first time in their history, they found someone who could unite them. His name was Vercingetorix, an Arverni prince who did what nobody thought possible. He convinced over 40 different tribes, ancient enemies who'd been killing each other for generations, to put aside their blood feuds and fight together against Rome. We're talking about warriors from the Atlantic coast to the Rhine River, from the Mediterranean all the way to the English Channel. Different languages, different gods, different fighting styles, all united by one thing. They absolutely hated the Romans. Meanwhile, back in Rome, Caesar's political enemies were circling like vultures. If he failed in Gaul, he wouldn't just lose his command. He'd be returning to Rome to face exile or possibly execution. His entire career, his life, everything depended on breaking this Gallic resistance completely, and Vercingetorix knew it. The Gallic leader had retreated to Alesia, a fortress sitting on a plateau surrounded by rivers and valleys, with natural defenses that made it nearly impregnable. Attacking it seemed like absolute madness. The high ground gave the defenders every advantage. Any army trying to storm those walls would be cut to pieces. But Caesar saw something everyone else missed. Vercingetorix had just locked 80,000 of his best warriors behind Alesia's walls. Sure, the fortress was defensible, but geography cuts both ways. Those 80,000 men needed food, water, supplies, fodder for their horses. What if, instead of attacking the fortress, Caesar just trapped them inside it and waited for them to starve? His scouts should have told him to retreat when they saw Alesia's defenses, but Caesar wasn't interested in playing it safe. He commanded 10 legions, roughly 50,000 professional soldiers who'd been fighting in Gaul for years. These weren't conscripts. They were trained killers with standardized equipment and iron discipline. He also had 10,000 Germanic cavalry, wild horsemen from beyond the Rhine who'd fight for anyone paying gold. Former enemies now riding alongside Roman legionaries, because Caesar was pragmatic enough to use whoever could get the job done. And his inner circle, it reads like a who's who of Roman history. There was Labienus, his second in command and tactical genius. Mark Antony, young and hungry for glory, getting his first major independent command. And get this, Marcus Brutus was there too, fighting loyally beside the man he'd eventually help assassinate. Caesar was literally teaching his future killer how to win battles. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. When Caesar ordered his men to start building walls around Alesia instead of attacking, the Gallic warriors must have thought the Romans had lost their minds. 11 miles of fortifications, a complete ring around the entire plateau. Engineers call it circumvallation. But here's where Caesar's genius turned into insanity. He received intelligence that a massive relief army was forming. We're talking about 250,000 men, possibly 300,000, marching to crush the Romans and break the siege. Any sane commander would have abandoned the siege and retreated. Caesar did the opposite. He ordered his men to build a second line of fortifications facing outward, another wall 14 miles long, creating a fortress within a fortress. He was deliberately trapping his own army between Alesia and the approaching relief force. Let that sink in. Caesar voluntarily put his 50,000 men in a position where they'd have to fight a two-front battle against odds of nearly 8-1. His own soldiers started to doubt him. Centurions reported murmurs in the ranks. These were men who understood courage, who'd fought against terrible odds before, but voluntarily trapping themselves seemed too far. Caesar personally toured the fortifications, speaking to work crews, explaining his vision. "We're not trapping ourselves," he told them. "We're creating a killing ground. Roman discipline will slaughter Gallic courage." The murmurs stopped. The construction itself was a masterpiece of military engineering that still blows minds today. These weren't simple wooden walls. Caesar's men dug 2 ditches, each 15 feet wide and 15 feet deep. The inner ditch was flooded wherever possible, creating a moat. Behind that rose a rampart 12 feet high topped with battlements. Towers were positioned every 80 feet along the entire circumference. Roughly 350 towers just for the inner wall facing Alesia. And they did it all while Gallic warriors fired arrows at them and launched raids to disrupt the construction. Roman soldiers literally worked with shields propped beside them, digging with one hand while keeping weapons within reach. But the defenses got even more brutal. Caesar's engineers installed what they called the Lilia, pits 3 feet deep with sharpened stakes at the bottom, concealed by brush. Thousands of these death traps dotted the approaches to both walls. Then there were the stimuli, foot-long iron spikes hammered into the grounded angles, basically ancient landmines that would tear through sandals and feet. And the sipi, logs with sharpened branches projecting outward at eye level that would impale charging cavalry and infantry. The Romans were building a mechanical meat grinder powered by human desperation. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix watched the walls going up and realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. He had too many warriors. 80,000 men were consuming supplies at a staggering rate. Hundreds of cattle, tons of grain, thousands of gallons of water every single day. His fortress was becoming his prison. He'd ordered scorched earth tactics across Gaul, burning farms and poisoning wells to deny Caesar supplies. But now that strategy was backfiring because his own relief army would find nothing to eat on their march to Alesia. Meanwhile, Caesar's Germanic cavalry ranged far and wide, securing food and winning crucial cavalry battles that demoralized the Gauls. If their cavalry couldn't win on open ground, what hope did they have? When the relief army finally arrived on September 20th, the dust clouds on the horizon looked like a dark ocean. Between 250 and 300,000 Gauls spread across the landscape in tribal contingents. From the walls, Romans could see they'd just built their own grave. But Caesar's preparation was about to pay off in the most spectacular way possible. The first assault came at dawn. 40,000 warriors charged the western section of the outer walls, war cries echoing off the hills. Simultaneously, Vercingetorix coordinated an attack on the inner fortifications. For the first time in history, an army was fighting the siege in two directions at once, and the Romans responded with mechanical precision. Pre-positioned sentries wheeled into place. The prepared defenses proved their worth immediately. Charging Gauls hit the concealed Alesia pits, men screaming as sticks punched through their feet and legs. The stimuli claimed hundreds more, iron spikes tearing through flesh. The Scippi funneled attacking forces into kill zones where Roman artillery had clear firing lines. Gauls trying to dodge giant arrows while navigating a maze of death traps didn't stand a chance. The sensory overload was unimaginable. Screams from both directions, arrows falling like deadly rain, the constant thunder of iron on wood and gladius on shield. Men were deafened for days afterward. By midday, a crisis developed in the northwest section. Vercingetorix, Vercingetorix's cousin, identified a weak point and led 60,000 picked warriors against a single section defended by 2 legions. 10,000 men facing 6-1 odds. Caesar watched from his command position in his purple cloak, visible to everyone. He had to make an impossible choice: reinforce the northwest and risk other sections, or trust his men to hold. This is where Caesar earned his legend. He sent exactly 6,000 reinforcements, just enough to stabilize the line without weakening other sectors. The fighting reached inhuman intensity. Some Roman sentries rotated into combat 3 times, men fighting despite wounds that would normally sideline them. There was nowhere to retreat. At peak intensity, Romans were firing 100,000 arrows per hour. The killing ground between the obstacles and walls became carpeted with bodies. Wounded Gauls couldn't retreat through the press of warriors behind them, so they died where they fell. Night brought no relief. The Gauls lit torches and continued the assault, but this actually worked against them. The Alesia pits were invisible in darkness and claimed thousands more victims. Gauls carrying torches made perfect targets for Roman archers. The attacking formations completely disintegrated in the confusion. Dawn of Day 2 revealed absolute carnage. Bodies piled 10 feet high in some sections. But the relief army was far from broken. Fresh contingents moved forward, stepping over their dead comrades. Caesar received desperate reports. Labienus's section was about to break after his men had fought for 20 straight hours. Mark Antony's position faced 40,000 Gauls with only 6,000 exhausted Romans. Both commanders sent the same message: cannot hold much longer. Caesar faced a commander's nightmare: 2 crisis points and insufficient reserves to save both. Then something nobody expected happened. The Germanic cavalry, held in reserve between the walls, took matters into their own hands. Their chieftain, his name lost to history, saw the crisis and acted without orders. 4,000 horsemen charged out the rear gate, rode hard around the entire battle, and hit the Gauls attacking Labienus from behind. Meanwhile, Caesar took his last reserve, 13 cohorts, about 6,000 men, and split them between Antony and Labienus. But here's the critical detail: Caesar didn't just send reinforcements, he led them himself, still wearing that purple cloak, clearly visible to everyone. The psychological impact was instant. Exhausted legionaries who could barely lift their shields found new strength. The cry, "Caesar comes," spread along the walls faster than any messenger could run. The next 60 seconds decided Western civilization. 3 forces converged on the northwest section simultaneously. Labienus's exhausted men held the wall. Caesar's reinforcements hit from inside, and the Germanic cavalry smashed into the Gallic rear. The Gauls were caught between three forces, pressed against their own obstacles with nowhere to go. The slaughter was absolute. Men unable to retreat through the press of their own warriors, unable to advance through Roman steel, died where they stood. The Germanic cavalry earned their gold that day, cutting down fleeing warriors with savage efficiency. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix watched his cousin's force disintegrate. He'd launched his own assault, sending every available warrior against the inner walls. And there was a brief, terrifying moment when the Gauls actually breached the inner wall in 3 places. Things went from desperate to impossible. But Caesar, still visible in that purple cloak, led a countercharge that military historians still study today. The sight of their commander personally leading reinforcements turned the tide. Romans who'd been falling back suddenly stood firm. Then came the moment that would haunt survivors forever. The relief army's main force saw the northwest attack fail. They saw thousands of their best warriors trapped and dying. And they broke. Not a gradual retreat or a fighting withdrawal. They simply turned and ran. 200,000 men fleeing the field, abandoning their trapped comrades inside Alesia. From the walls, Vercingetorix saw it happen. The greatest army Gaul had ever assembled melted away like morning mist. His assault on the inner walls faltered as word spread. Warriors ready to die suddenly lost heart. Caesar seized the moment. Fresh Germanic cavalry pursued the fleeing Gauls for miles, cutting down stragglers. Roman infantry sorted from the fortifications, adding to the slaughter. The killing continued until exhaustion, not mercy, stopped it. By sunset on the second day, 50,000 Romans had done the impossible. Dawn of the third day brought eerie silence. A white flag appeared from Alesia's highest tower. Vercingetorix, after witnessing his relief army's abandonment and losing thousands of his best warriors, called a final council. The debate raged through the night. Some advocated fighting to death. Others pointed out the families also trapped inside. Vercingetorix ended it with characteristic nobility. I united Gaul to fight for freedom. I won't let it die for my pride. He would surrender personally, taking full responsibility, hoping Caesar might spare the others. The surrender ceremony became legendary. Vercingetorix donned his finest armor, mounted his best horse, and rode out from Alesia's gates alone. He approached Caesar's command position, and, in full view of both armies, circled Caesar's chair once. One final moment of Gallic pride, then dismounted and laid his weapons at the Romans' feet. Caesar remained seated throughout. The symbolism was deliberate and crushing. In that moment, independent Gaul died forever. The statistics tell a brutal story. 40,000 Gauls dead between the walls in just 2 days. Thousands more killed in pursuit. Roman casualties were remarkably light. 12,000 wounded, 5,000 dead. The Lilia pits alone killed more enemies than many entire battles. As for the survivors, Caesar's treatment depended on politics. Aedui and Arverni warriors, from tribes Rome needed as allies, were released. The other 40,000 were distributed among Caesar's legions as slaves, payment for years of hard campaigning. Vercingetorix received special treatment. Caesar couldn't execute such a valuable prisoner immediately. The Gallic leader was kept in Roman custody for 6 years, a living trophy, saved for Caesar's eventual triumph in Rome. When that day finally came, Vercingetorix was paraded through the streets of Rome and then ritually strangled in the Mamertine prison. His death marked the final act of Alesia's tragedy. The impact of Alesia extended far beyond those September days in 52 BCE. Caesar's double wall technique revolutionized siege warfare forever. Military engineers studied his fortifications for centuries. Napoleon himself visited the site trying to understand Caesar's genius. Even today, military academies analyze the battle as the perfect example of turning defensive warfare into offensive victory. Politically, Alesia cleared Caesar's path to civil war. Who arrests a general who conquered Gaul? The wealth from Gallic slaves and plunder made him richer than some kingdoms. The loyalty of veterans forged in moments like Alesia would follow him across the Rubicon. But the true cost? Within a generation, Gallic nobles were sending their sons to study in Rome. An entire civilization that had dominated Europe for centuries faded into memory. The Gallic Wars cost an estimated 1 million lives, with another million enslaved. Alesia marked the end point of this cultural genocide. The moment organized Gallic resistance died and Celtic culture began its transformation into Gallo-Roman civilization. Caesar's gamble vindicated more than military theory. By choosing the impossible, by refusing to accept limitations, he demonstrated that audacity could overcome arithmetic. 50,000 disciplined men could defeat 380,000 brave ones. Fortune really does favor the bold. And sometimes, the most insane strategy creates the most lasting victory. Caesar buried his army alive between those walls, and in doing so, gave birth to an empire that would last 1,000 years. That's the story of how one man's calculated insanity at Alesia changed the course of Western civilization forever.